They laughed while you bled and called it a joke. You stood there silent while their words sliced through you like finely crafted knives. They didn't need swords. Their tongues were sharper. Every smirk became a scar. Every whisper a wound that refused to close. They wanted to see you fall, not because you were weak, but because your strength made them insecure. They mocked what they couldn't match. They called your hunger obsession. They called your silence weakness. They called your focus insanity. And when you turned away from their games, they called you arrogant. It's funny how mediocrity always mocks greatness until it needs saving. You carried their humiliation like a chain around your neck, heavy, rusted, choking. But the more it tightened, the more it shaped you. Pressure became design. Pain became blueprint. You stopped defending yourself because you realized the truth. There's no point proving your worth to people who are addicted to misunderstanding you. The crowd laughed, thinking the story ended. They didn't realize some creatures don't die, they molt. You didn't fall, you shed. Every humiliation peeled away a layer of naivety. Every insult burned away another illusion. And in the ashes, something darker, something sharper began to rise. That's where the mistake began. They mistook your silence for surrender. But silence isn't surrender. Silence is evolution. It's the breath before the roar. It's the pause before the storm. It's the quiet hum of something dangerous being built in the dark. You learn that humiliation is not an ending. It's a beginning. It's the soil where monsters grow. It's the forge where kings are reforged. You learn to stop asking, why me? And started saying, try me. You realized they weren't laughing at you. They were laughing before you. Before the transformation. Before the reckoning. Before the day your name would taste like iron in their mouths. They called your pain funny. You turned their laughter into thunder. Every time they clapped at your downfall, you were taking notes. Every time they whispered, you were memorizing names. Every time they celebrated your struggle, you were preparing their eulogy. You stopped speaking because explanations are a gift, and they didn't deserve one. They didn't deserve to understand what kind of storm was forming behind your silence. They didn't deserve to know that humiliation was never your weakness. It was your initiation. Because humiliation doesn't destroy everyone. For some, it's fuel. For others, it's transformation. And for the rare few, it's rebirth. You became one of the rare few. You turned mockery into momentum. You learned that revenge doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes it walks in wearing discipline. Sometimes it arrives dressed as success. Sometimes it doesn't even look at them. It just makes the entire world look away from them. They think the cruelest thing they did was laugh. But the truth is, the cruelest thing you'll ever do is make them remember why they shouldn't have. Because when you rise, they'll recognize their own laughter echoing in the background, haunting, hollow, and they'll see the reflection of the joke they created, standing taller than their gods, colder than their excuses. Humiliation was your battlefield. You didn't fight it, you ruled it. Every wound became a weapon, every scar became a scripture, and every ounce of pain became prophecy. You started walking through the world like a warning, unbothered, unshaken, unforgiving, because once you've been laughed at by the world, nothing else can truly hurt you. Mockery became your immunity. You learned that people laugh when they can't comprehend something, and they fear what they don't understand. So you let them laugh. You let them enjoy the illusion of your defeat, because every sound they made became your drumbeat. Every insult became rhythm. Every humiliation became harmony. They never realized you were conducting the orchestra, and when the music stopped, when the silence finally settled, when the same mouths that mocked you were forced to whisper your name in awe, that's when you smiled, not in joy, but in justice. You understood something most never will, that sometimes the universe uses mockery to mock the chosen, that those who laugh first never laugh last, that the ones who humiliate you in front of the crowd will one day bow to the memory of what they tried to destroy. So now when they laugh again, you don't flinch, you don't explain, you don't react, because the difference between you and them is simple. They laugh to escape reality. You laugh because you became it. Their laughter used to hurt. Now it helps, because it reminds you that you made it out. You outgrew them. You outlasted them. You outlived the version of you they tried to bury. And when they look at you now, they see what humiliation looks like when it evolves. Now their laughter echoes, not as mockery, but as a memory of their own downfall. Betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from handshakes. You never saw it coming, not from strangers, but from the ones who said your name with a smile. You trusted faces that clapped for you in daylight, but cursed your name in candlelight. You thought loyalty was mutual. You thought heart recognized heart. But you forgot. Some people shake hands only to measure where to stab. Every fake smile was a dagger wrapped in politeness. Every compliment carried poison under its tongue. They studied your kindness like blueprints to learn how to exploit it. They didn't stab you in the back. They waited till you bowed. Because it's easier to aim when you've earned someone's trust. You didn't lose friends. You lost masks. And for a while, that realization burned. Because betrayal doesn't just break you. It disorients you. It makes you question every laugh, every gesture, every promise that once felt real. You start wondering if any of it was ever true. But that's how the lesson begins. Not with peace, but with fire. Pain became your university, and betrayal, your professor. You didn't read books, you read faces. You didn't take notes, you took wounds. You didn't attend lectures. You attended losses. And with every heartbreak, every fake apology, every knife that found your spine, you learned. You learned that love without loyalty is just a performance. You learned that not everyone who claps is on your side. And you learned that "I've got your back" often means "I'm waiting for my turn." At first, it hurt, because you kept trying to understand. You kept asking, why me? Why the betrayal? Why the lies? Why the people you would have died for were the ones who buried you alive? But eventually you stopped asking. You stopped needing closure, because you realized that betrayal doesn't define your weakness. It reveals their nature. You learned the language of snakes, not to speak it, but to recognize the hiss. You began to see through the smiles. You started hearing the tone behind the tone. You began to sense when people said, "Trust me," that it was really a warning. You understood that loyalty is not something you demand. It's something you detect. It's not spoken. It's proven in silence, in absence, in consistency when no one's watching. You stopped being naive. And that's when the fear left you. Because once you've been betrayed, you become immune to illusions. You stop chasing sincerity in broken mirrors. You stop expecting loyalty from opportunists. You stop hoping for honesty from performers. The fire they started became the forge that built you. You used their betrayal as fuel, their deception as data, their rejection as redesign. Every lie sharpened your awareness. Every cut refined your precision. You began to move differently, talk differently, think differently. You stopped reacting. You started observing. You stopped bleeding. You started building. And while they whispered about your downfall, you were laying foundations, brick by brick, scar by scar, plan by plan. That's what betrayal teaches, strategy. You learned patience from delay, discipline from disappointment, and foresight from failure. You stopped telling people your dreams because you realized dreams are safest in silence. You stopped seeking validation because you learned attention is a currency that drains power. You stopped forgiving too fast because forgiveness without change is self-betrayal. You didn't grow cold, you grew clear, and there's a difference. Clarity looks like cruelty to those who benefited from your confusion. You no longer mistake proximity for loyalty. You no longer confuse pity for love. You no longer allow sorry to erase patterns. They thought betrayal broke you, but it rebuilt you with titanium resolve. They thought they taught you pain, but they ended up teaching you precision. You became something new, something calculated, something dangerous, something untouchable. Your emotions didn't die, they evolved. They became focused energy, no longer wasted on people who traded loyalty for convenience. You started walking with the awareness of someone who's been burned and learned how to control the fire. Because that's the paradox. Betrayal is not your downfall. It's your awakening. It's the breaking of the illusion that everyone deserves your trust. And when that illusion dies, a new version of you rises, colder, sharper, unstoppable. The kind of version that no longer needs to prove, no longer needs to explain, no longer needs to be liked. They'll say you've changed. They'll say you became ruthless. They'll say you've lost your warmth. But what they'll never admit is that you became everything they never thought you could survive becoming. So you let them talk. You let them rewrite the story. Because history has always been written by those who endure. Betrayal gave you something purer than trust. It gave you truth. And truth doesn't need defense. It simply outlasts lies. And when they finally realize what they lost, it will be too late. Because you no longer live in their world. You built your own. Every betrayal was a brick, and you built your empire with it. Then came the silence, not peace, but preparation. You disappeared, not because you were lost, but because you were learning how to return as something unrecognizable. While they laughed, you vanished into the dark, where noise cannot follow purpose. They thought you gave up, but in reality you were sharpening what they couldn't see. Your mind, your will, your fire. You became quiet, not weak. Quiet like a storm holding its breath. Quiet like the moment before lightning divides the sky. You realize that the loudest people rarely have power. They have panic. But the silent ones, they're the architects of chaos. They wanted you to react. They wanted you to break character. They wanted you to scream, to explain, to prove something. But you didn't, because you finally learned. Silence is not the absence of noise, it's the presence of control. You learned that power doesn't announce itself. It arrives without warning, without mercy, without permission, and that terrified them. Because your silence forced them to hear their own echo, their own guilt bouncing off the walls they built around you. They tried to read you, but your stillness became a mirror they couldn't decode. Their laughter faded into uncertainty. Their gossip turned into guesswork. Their confidence began to fracture because you no longer played your part in their theater. They asked, "Where did you go?" But you never left. You simply evolved. You were building behind closed doors while they danced in the ruins of their own arrogance. You were turning every wound into weaponry, every doubt into discipline, every scar into silence, and every silence into strategy. The caterpillar doesn't explain the cocoon, it just disappears. And when it returns, the world calls it a miracle, forgetting it was once mocked for crawling. That's the phase they'll never understand, the quiet construction of something inevitable. You didn't post it, you didn't announce it. You didn't need applause for becoming unstoppable. You just kept showing up in the dark, disciplined, unseen, and dangerously focused. They mistook absence for defeat, but absence was just camouflage. You were studying the battlefield while they wasted their ammunition. You were rewriting your purpose while they recycled their gossip. And when they finally looked up, they realized the silence had shape, and the shape had teeth. You stopped reacting, because kings don't answer to jesters. You realized noise is the weapon of the powerless. They shout because they need validation. You stayed silent because you needed victory. You learned that vengeance doesn't always scream. Sometimes it watches, sometimes it calculates, sometimes it lets time do the talking, because time has a way of humbling the loud. Let them talk. The silence is louder than their applause, because your silence wasn't retreat, it was reconstruction. While they wasted breath, you were learning how to move like smoke, like shadows, like inevitability. You became the thing they couldn't see coming, and that's what made you dangerous. And slowly they began to notice, not your return, but your absence. They noticed the conversations became empty without your name. They noticed the energy shifted when you stopped showing up. They noticed their victories felt hollow, because every empire built on mockery collapses when the target stops caring. Your silence became their punishment. It haunted them. It echoed through the halls of their own insecurity. Because the truth is, they were never laughing at you. They were laughing to hide from themselves. And when you took your silence with you, they were forced to face it. That's the power of retreat. It leaves ghosts behind. Your silence became an atmosphere, a reminder, a prophecy, because the quiet ones never stay quiet forever. They return, colder, wiser, unstoppable. And when you finally moved again, you didn't announce it. You didn't warn anyone. You just stepped forward, and the ground itself seemed to remember who it was carrying. You started walking like a storm that forgot how to be soft. Every move was deliberate, every glance calculated, every word weaponized, and they finally understood. Your silence wasn't empty, it was loading. They'll say they never saw it coming, but that's the point. You don't warn the world before you change it. You don't whisper before you roar. You don't explain evolution, you become it. And so you moved in silence. You built in silence. You healed in silence. And when the time came, you struck in silence. Because by the time they noticed the silence, it had already turned into thunder. They wanted a monster. You gave them a masterpiece. You looked into the mirror and finally saw the truth. The version of you they feared. The one they tried to bury. The one they mocked, misunderstood, underestimated. You saw it staring back at you, not broken, not bleeding, not begging, but becoming. Every scar glowed like a medal. Every loss turned into design. Every mistake evolved into architecture. You realized pain was never the enemy. It was the sculptor. And you were the statue learning to move. They called you crazy, so you made insanity your crown. They called you obsessed, So you made obsession your armor. They said you changed. They were right. You did. You stopped healing. You started upgrading. You stopped being the victim of your story and became its villain. Because the world doesn't listen to the broken, it listens to the feared. You understood that sympathy is a leash, but power is wings. You learned how to weaponize humiliation, to make their laughter a soundtrack to their regret. You turned ridicule into rhythm, mockery into music. You made their noise the score behind your rise. And the beauty of it, you didn't even need revenge. Your existence became proof that they miscalculated. Every step you took rewrote their narrative. Every success you built exposed their short memory. You realize the greatest form of revenge is not destruction, it's demonstration. Let them label you villain. Even devils were angels once, until betrayal gave them purpose. They made you the enemy because you stopped being their entertainment. They called you dangerous because you stopped being disposable. And the moment you stopped asking for permission, they started praying for your failure. But failure never came because you learned how to feed on it. You learned that rejection burns like acid, but it also cleanses everything weak inside you. And from that corrosion, you built armor that no opinion could pierce. You stopped chasing approval. You demanded acknowledgement. You no longer begged for belonging. You became your own kingdom. You stopped looking for peace and started building power. Power isn't loud, it's surgical. It moves in precision, not panic. It doesn't roar, it recalibrates. It doesn't argue, it calculates. You became the kind of calm that frightens chaos, the kind of silence that makes noise. Nervous, you started walking through the world like a ghost of every wrong done to you. Untouchable, unshakable, unforgettable. They thought they were watching your end, but they were witnessing your engineering. Because what they broke didn't die, it multiplied. They tried to shame you in front of the crowd. Now the crowd chants your name, and when they whisper about your madness, you smile. Because they'll never understand that madness is just the name society gives to the ones who stop obeying its illusions. They call it crazy when you stop needing comfort. They call it dangerous when you stop needing them. They call it evil when you finally learn how to say no. That's when you learned the truth. You were never meant to fit in. You were meant to fracture the mold, to burn down the system that thrived on your silence. You were born to be misunderstood, because understanding is the death of mystery, and mystery is the foundation of power. They wanted you predictable. You became paradox. They wanted you small. You became storm. They wanted you guilty. You became godlike. And that mirror you used to hate, it became your throne. You stopped flinching at your reflection. You started admiring it, because it no longer showed you pain. It showed you proof. You looked into your own eyes and saw the one thing they never could. A mind they couldn't control, a soul they couldn't buy, a will they couldn't bend. You became what they feared most, someone who doesn't break, someone who doesn't beg, someone who doesn't belong to anyone. You are no longer healing. You are harvesting the pain, the betrayal, the chaos, turning it all into empire. You no longer run from darkness, you build with it. You no longer fear shadows, you command them. Because once you've walked through fire, you stop fearing warmth. They'll call you cold now. They'll call you ruthless. They'll say you lost your heart. But what they'll never admit is that you finally found your spine. You were the outcast. Now you're the omen. You were the mistake. Now you're the myth. They wanted a monster, but monsters don't lose sleep. They create it. And every time they see your smile now, they remember the joke and realize they became the punchline. The same mouths that mocked you now whisper your name like a warning. They used to laugh loud. Now they lower their voices when they say your name. They used to speak carelessly. Now they choose every word like it could be their last. Because the one they called broken is the one writing their fate. They walk carefully now, afraid of tripping over the ghosts of their own words. Every lie they spread returned to them, carved in truth. Every rumor they built became their scripture of regret. Every insult they threw came back carrying your seal of victory. They used to laugh at your pain. Now, they rehearse apologies they'll never deliver. They say time heals all wounds, but time didn't heal you. It crowned you. You didn't move on, you moved above. They can't meet your eyes anymore, because your gaze reflects everything they tried to destroy but couldn't. You became the mirror they can't bear to face, because it reminds them of who made you. They built you with mockery, forged you with betrayal, baptized you in chaos. And now they kneel to their own creation. Your rise wasn't an accident. It was a verdict, a divine correction, a reminder that the universe keeps receipts. Justice doesn't always wear a robe. Sometimes it wears a grin. Sometimes it walks into the room quietly and lets the guilty choke on their own laughter. You don't need a gavel. Your existence is the sentence. Your silence is the signature. Your success is the execution. They wanted to humiliate you, but ended up baptizing you in chaos. They wanted to bury you, but you used their dirt as foundation. They wanted to break you, but all they did was teach you where you're unbreakable. You are their unintended masterpiece, their greatest mistake. Now they speak of you with caution. They tell stories, twisted and diluted, trying to sound innocent. They say, we knew him once. We were close. We were there before it all changed. But they never tell the part where they laughed, where they mocked, where they doubted, Because history always edits out the cowards. Every rumor they started became a prophecy fulfilled. Every doubt they cast became proof of destiny. Because that's the irony of arrogance. It always underestimates discipline. They thought you'd collapse under pressure. You became pressure. Now the same people who called you too much can't handle the version of you that learned control. The same people who mocked your silence now wait for your approval before they speak. And the same crowd that threw stones now builds statues, pretending they were supporters all along. You walk past them, and they look away, because your presence is judgment, not with words, not with revenge, but with results. You don't need to say, "I told you so." Your life screams it for you, quietly, constantly, undeniably. This is what poetic justice looks like. Not rage, not revenge, but realization. The realization that you won without becoming them, that you rose without permission, that you built without validation. The world claps for you now, but you remember when that same sound was laughter. And that's why you never let the applause blind you, because you learned the truth. The same hands that clap can crucify. The same tongues that praise can poison. The same faces that smile can sabotage. You stand where kings once fell, where martyrs once cried, where traitors once celebrated. And now the same stage where they mocked you has become your courtroom. You are the verdict. You are the consequence. You are the correction the universe delivers to arrogance. They called you a monster, and now they pray to the myth. Because the monster didn't just survive, he adapted. He learned their tactics. He learned their silence, and he turned their entire system into his own stage. Let them remember, humiliation doesn't destroy kings. It defines their reign. Your crown wasn't handed to you. It was hammered from their disrespect. Your throne wasn't gifted. It was built from the ruins of every doubt they buried you under. Your empire wasn't found. It was forged. You owe them nothing, but your legend owes them everything. Because without their betrayal, there would be no empire. Without their mockery, there would be no myth. Without their laughter, there would be no thunder. And so you don't hate them. You thank them silently, cruelly, completely. Because nothing is more painful to the guilty than knowing they made the thing they fear. Now every time they laugh, it trembles. Because even their humor bows to your legend. Their laughter isn't freedom anymore. It's confession. It's the sound of a guilty conscience trying to stay alive under the weight of your name. They once thought you were the joke. Now they realize you became the punchline that ended their performance. Now the echoes of their laughter sound like hymns to your name. What was once mockery has become mythology. What was once humiliation has become history. Because in the end, Every insult they threw became your introduction. Every rumor became rehearsal for your reign. Every laugh became a drumbeat that marched you to the throne. You no longer need revenge, because existence itself became your proof. You don't chase closure. You don't crave validation. You are the validation. You're the evidence that survival is louder than apology. The world that once mocked now kneels, not to your anger, but to your endurance, not to your crown, but to the fire that forged it. You turn shame into scripture, pain into prophecy. Your name carries the weight of everything you survived, and that's what makes it sacred. You didn't rise because of mercy. You rose because destiny doesn't bend to mockery. They tried to bury you in ridicule, not realizing you were a seed, and every ounce of dirt they threw only fed your roots. You grew through storms they swore would drown you. You bloomed in silence they thought would suffocate you. You became the garden in the graveyard they built, and now the same people who threw stones walk on paths paved with your endurance. You rose not to prove them wrong, but to prove destiny right. Because destiny was never about being liked. It was about being inevitable. And you became exactly that. Inevitable, unshakable, unforgettable. You learned that legacies aren't written by those who were accepted, but by those who refused to disappear. You learned that greatness doesn't come from being understood. It comes from being unstoppable. And you learned that power isn't measured in praise. It's measured in how long your name echoes after silence. Let them talk. Even their hate is a form of worship, because you've transcended their opinions. Their insults are your anthem. Their envy is your empire. They don't realize it yet, but every time they speak your name, they're keeping your legend alive. You've become a storm they can't stop mentioning, a ghost that never dies, a myth disguised as memory. You've become the embodiment of every insult that failed to kill you. You carry the proof that pain can be weaponized, that broken bones still march, that silence can still scream. You don't need to remind them of who you are. Your existence does that for you. Every move you make echoes like thunder through the ruins of their judgment. Every victory you take rewrites the story they tried to bury you in. History remembers kings who conquered. Eternity remembers the ones who couldn't be broken. You didn't just survive humiliation, you transformed it. You made it art. You made it prophecy. You made it eternal. Because humiliation isn't the end, it's the beginning of empire. When the world mocked your silence, it didn't realize silence is the sound of strategy. When they mocked your fall, they didn't realize gravity only affects those without wings. You built wings out of their words and flew above every insult they crafted. Now when they whisper your name, it doesn't sting, it summons. It reminds the world of what happens when a man learns to build kingdoms out of curses. You became everything they tried to destroy, and more. And now their voices, their laughter, their attempts to erase you have all become your choir. Because that's the secret they never knew. You don't erase power by mocking it. You make it eternal. You don't bury a legacy with lies. You plant it. And in time, even their hatred becomes fertilizer. You no longer walk for applause. You walk for legacy. You walk for the ones who were mocked and silenced. For every soul who was laughed at, doubted, and discarded. You became their symbol, the embodiment of the storm that silence breeds. You are the monument to what they could never break, the reminder that the world only respects those it once tried to destroy. You are the storm that didn't fade, the scar that didn't heal, the ghost that didn't leave. And when the dust finally settles, your story won't be remembered as tragedy, but as testament. Because legends aren't born from peace, they're carved from pressure, from betrayal, from humiliation, from everything that was meant to end you. You didn't just rise, you resurrected, and in your resurrection, the mockers found their reflection. Their laughter now serves as your choir, their regret, your rhythm, their silence, your crown. They tried to humiliate you, but in the end, humiliation wore your name like a crown.